Welcome to This Explainer. We're all about turning complex history and data into a story that just clicks. And today, we're doing something really cool. We're heading back to the 19th century to crack a huge geopolitical mystery, and we're going to do it using an ancient text. All right, let's dive right in. The 19th century was absolutely dominated by this massive international crisis that everybody called the Eastern Question. You see, the whole world was holding its breath, watching as the once unstoppable Ottoman Empire, which had earned this sad nickname, the sick man of Europe, was visibly and very publicly crumbling.
And this wasn't just some local issue. Not at all. You had the world's great powers. We're talking Britain, Russia, everybody, all asking the same question. What on earth happens when the Turkish Empire, an empire that spanned continents, finally gets pushed out of Europe? Who gets the pieces? It was a global chess match.
Now, for a lot of people watching all this chaos unfold, the real answers weren't going to be found in political debates or newspaper headlines. In fact, for a group of Christians, the early Seventh-day Adventists, they believed the key was hiding in plain sight, right inside the ancient prophetic book of Daniel. They were totally convinced that the news they were reading about, the sick man of Europe, was actually a direct fulfillment of a prophecy written down centuries earlier, a prophecy about this powerful, mysterious figure. So for them, this wasn't just politics, it was prophecy literally coming to life.
So you're probably asking, how did they pinpoint this king? Well, their method was surprisingly simple. It had nothing to do with religion, it was all about geography. The king of the north was just the power that controlled the northern part of Alexander the Great's old empire. And in the 1800s, there was zero doubt about who that was, the Ottoman Empire, which back then everyone just called Turkey.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. They weren't just throwing darts at a board here. They had a really strict set of rules for how to interpret these things, a method they believed was the key to unlocking history itself.
This quote really lays out their whole philosophy. See, they believed prophecy was just history written in advance. So their job was to take what was happening in the world and see if it fit the prophecy word for word, kind of like a key fitting into a lock. If even one little word was off, the interpretation was wrong. Period. And here's their method in action. It's pretty brilliant. Back in 1798, Napoleon invades Egypt, the territory of the King of the South. For them, that was a perfect match for Daniel 11, verse 40, which says the King of the South will push at him. Then, fast forward to the 1850s. The Ottoman Sultan is getting hassled by Russia to the north and Persia to the east, which kicks off the Crimean War. Boom, a perfect match for verse 44.
So after mapping out current events all the way up to verse 44 of Daniel chapter 11, they believed there was only one verse left, just one final piece of the prophetic puzzle that needed to fall into place.
This created this really clear dividing line in their minds. On one side, you had stuff they considered fulfilled prophecy, basically historical fact. And on the other side was the future, what they believed verse 45 predicted would happen next, that the Sultan would make his last stand in Jerusalem.
So, based on this final verse, they actually outlined a specific sequence of events they expected to watch unfold. But, and this is important, look at the careful language they always used. Phrases like, "as we believe." They were not shouting this from the rooftops as absolute fact. And that brings us to what I think is maybe the most impressive part of their whole approach, a real sense of intellectual caution, especially when it came to predicting what was next.
This quote from James White, one of their most important leaders, just nails it. He's basically warning everyone, hey, when you're talking about prophecy that hasn't happened yet, you need to tread lightly. Don't be too sure of yourself, or you'll just end up lost in your own imagination.
This created such a powerful way of thinking for them. When it came to the past, where they could see history and prophecy lining up, they were certain. But the future? They approached that with a lot of humility. Their ideas about what might happen next were just that. Ideas or propositions that were shaped by the news of their day, not some infallible prediction. They were totally open to the idea that they could be wrong.
You know, this whole 19th century hunt for the King of the North is just a fascinating window into how people try to make sense of a chaotic world, and it really leaves us with a big question for our own time, doesn't it? How do the headlines and the anxieties of today end up shaping the way we imagine tomorrow?